I think we're live. Check that out. Well, either this works or it doesn't.
Shall we check very quickly to make sure that we're on
um,
from the YouTube side?
you do that. I'll try to give a brief intro. So
Okay.
I'm Alex, and this is Ryan, my co-host and friend and colleague. So what we're going to try to do with this channel, let's put a couple of notes down. I think we're going to use this episode, our first episode, to create a framework. But before we even do that, let's talk about what we want to do with the channel. So you may have noticed that everybody's talking about the AI coming, and we wanted to put down some ideas we've been working on. We basically want to rewind. We've been working on a bunch of ideas on how to make the most of the latest tools in AI, mostly around the text, large language models type. And also, we have been actively interested for a few months on how to combine digital technology and artificial intelligence with collective intelligence, and how to bring these two things together. So naturally, the next thing we wanted to do, which is this channel, is to do that experimentation in public. Let's say. What we want to do, however, for this first episode, instead of just jumping in with the tools and the various sort of tricks we've found and ideas, experiments we want to run, is to talk through why we're doing this, um, and where we think it's situated within the kind of AI risk discourse. So I think that's the basic frame. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to add anything, or we should just dive in.
Yeah, I think of things like these. A good piece of advice I heard once was, if there's an elephant in the room, introduce it straight away. And we're going to be intending to talk about generalizing these capabilities to the little guy, for lack of a better term, right? And we're going to be playing around with as close to the cutting edge as we can get, right? So the natural response from people who are sort of worried about things in the AI risk space might be to um, think of not necessarily us specifically, but people that have that sort of go forth mindset as being on an irresponsible path, right? So it
Right.
made sense to start off and address those concerns as best we can, and of course, I think we'll revisit those concerns as time goes on, because it's not a conversation that's going to take place once and done, right? It's going to be an iterative process.
Yeah,
But
and I
it
mean, I
made
think we
sense to
should.
call it out up front.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we should articulate that we are not by any means sort of broadcasting our certainty here. We are broadcasting our current position. And
Yeah.
I think everybody who's engaging in this conversation responsibly should, at all times, sort of be willing to revise their position if shown, evidence to the contrary. Um, okay, so I think the thing that sets us apart probably from most in the AI commentary space is, well, first of all, that we're going to be trying to make stuff. So there's that. But the other part is that we are not as um, how, these words are difficult, especially when you're improvising it. But um, I think there's a predominant vibe from people who know about AI to also be concerned, and concerned in a very specific direction of, we need to create frameworks, we need to create regulations, we need to create authorities that oversee, regulate AI. We need to constrain what the labs can do, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we know about as much about this problem as most of the people commenting on it, but we have the opposite view, which is that um, as much as we would like to have formal proofs of safety on AI and whatever else, we also would like to have, that same level of assurance that any particular intervention being suggested, especially ones that will be constraining what people can do with this technology, should have the same barrier of proof crossed, right? We can't say, we demand, 100% proof that AI will be safe, but then we're willing to do an intervention that we can't even articulate why it'll help. Just, people think it'll help, so let's just do it. I think we need equal rigor on all fronts of this conversation if we're going to go forward. And in particular, I think a lot of the knee-jerk regulation approaches are nowhere near as compelling as the people who are advocating for it would have you think. And I have that conversation on a daily basis on Twitter, and you'll be surprised, when you say, what makes you think that will make the situation better, like having an international treaty or making an organization
Mm-hmm.
to supervise or whatever. It's surprisingly quiet
Yeah,
exchange after that. Like there's very, very little. People can articulate why they think AI is going to be a problem, which we don't
sure.
necessarily, I think, object to. At least not on that level of generality. But they have a very hard time articulating why, creating a central authority that will constrain or attempt to constrain anyway the various players will actually make the situation better.
Yeah, to maybe give another phrasing of that, I think the core recognition is that any move you make, including inaction, is still a move that is subject to the lever of the environment we find ourselves in, right? The downstream consequences of any move we make as a society or as individuals, they sort of are going to tend to have the same amplitude in whatever direction they push us. So we should be just as careful. We should be just as concerned about uh, ham-fisted legislation or agreements or pacts or regulation law, whatever angle uh, you want to suggest. We should be just as concerned about the downstream impact of those actions, even if on their face they look like they're restraining actions, as we would be about a let her rip scenario.
Yeah. So okay. So let's get into the things we want to talk about. So I think we have two lists of things we want to cover. The first one is what not to do, right, which we've sort of started to discuss already, and the other thing is what can we do. So in the what not to do column, I've got a few notes here. So forgive me for looking on screen. The first thing is that time goes forwards, not backwards, right? Which means that a lot of people are like, we should stop everything. We should, put the genie back in the bottle, put the toothpaste back in the tube, however you want to call it.
Point of order. Point of
Yes,
order. I
yes.
would actually call this what we can't do. I think we should be very clear that, like, to the best of our knowledge right now, when we talk about like you can't go back, it really is, not only should we not do this, but we fundamentally can't anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, as with any emergency situation management, the first thing is to put your feet down in reality. Actually, there's a useful concept that it might be worth bringing up here, which is just called the OODA loop. Does that ring any bells, Ryan? Have you heard it before?
Observe, something, decide, act.
Observe, orient, decide, act. Yes. So that's
Yep.
the feedback loop that a pilot in the Air Force supposedly uses especially when they've sort of fainted because of sort of high G's, and then they come back to their senses, right? And so that disorientation is very likely to cause them to get hurt. So, to have an accident basically. So, what they're trained to do is this OODA loop, which is, first of all, you observe, you look around you, right? You find out what you can know about your environment. Secondly, you orient, you basically which way is up, right? And then you decide, out of all the actions you can do, you do what you can do. You do what is best to sort of accomplish your objectives, whether that's not dying or accomplishing your mission. And then you act, right? Once you have decided what you do it. That might sound trivial, and sort of why are we even talking about this? However, it is a big sort of um,
Well, it's encoding the obvious is the
yeah,
way you prevent panic from taking
right.
over.
Right, exactly. So I think the first thing that implies is don't try to do things you can't do. Right, don't be taken away in dreams. Right, don't start sort of wistfully thinking, "If only we could this, if only we could that." We can't. Let's move on. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because we actually have a job to do now. It's not about having a drink, on a lazy Sunday and talking about what might have been. It is we actually have a problem. I think everybody agrees with that. So let's figure out what we can do rather than just sort of, giving into wish thinking. So we can't go back, right? This is just where we are. The second one is there's no we, right? So a lot of people will say, well, if only we would this, or if only we would pass a law, or if only we would limit compute, if only we would track all GPUs. That kind of implies that humanity is an agent that can act coherently as a whole and can take actions that like cover everybody, right? And that's just, I mean, humanity. Yes, we are a species and we are in communications and we affect each other and tend to have certain like herd behaviors. Yes, right. Fashions tend to spread or whatever. But this sort of, we should do X in practice gets implemented as there's one unifying coordinating entity that forces everybody to do X, right?
Yeah.
And that has a whole bunch of side effects that I don't think people are fully cognizant of. So there is no, we don't just simply get up on tomorrow morning and all decide to like stop developing AGI or whatever. So again, that's something that we should probably just take out of our vocabulary if we're going to actually try to solve the problem ahead of us. Another, I don't know if you have something more to add to this one.
Yeah, no, I'd say just the any solution that starts with we is reminiscent to me of answering the question of how do we get world peace by, well, we should just outlaw war, right?
Right.
It's the problem is always, okay, we're going to come to a decision and take an action. The immediate next problem is how do you enforce that thing? And ironically, in this case, the answer is always totalitarianism, right? It's the only way to
Well,
get everyone to do exactly what you want.
oh,
Now, setting aside for the fact that it won't work to a degree of 100%, ironically, trying to make it work will probably make the people who have the keys to the kingdom in the AGI or just artificial intelligence space more broadly leverage those tools to implement the totalitarianism. But maybe that's skipping ahead.
well, the the thing is that we have tried that, right? We did once say if only the government could outlaw drugs or increase the the cost of the penalties for the sentences, for dealing drugs or mandatory minimums, this that harder. We fought the war on drugs and the drugs won. We fought the war on poverty and poverty won. We fought the war on terror and terror won. Like we know how this plays out. Like, are we gonna fight a war on AI? Are you like is this going to be like a prohibitionist sort of take? We know what happened with prohibition as well, right? It doesn't not only doesn't it work, it actually amplifies the problem you you're trying to supposedly solve. Like fentanyl is a dominant form of opium right now because it is um, easy to transport. It's highly compact, right? It's very concentrated, um, which leads to all sorts of other problems. Um, but so in a way, the very imperfect prohibition is what leads to making the problem worse, right? You create an evolutionary slope
Hmm.
for the problem to evolve. So unless you're going to do it 100%, which is the totalitarian state approach, don't don't do it. Anyway, that's the second sort of don't do. The third one is about the probability of doom, right? So people will say, I foresee a probability of doom of 80%, 70%, 50%, 20%, 5%, 95%, whatever. And that tends to definitely attract a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs, and also become a topic of conversation. What's your P do? What's your P do? Whatever. And I think we both, as we were discussing this before, think that needs to be put in a broader context. You had a good formulation, but just to set it up, for me, the question is, how likely were we to have a bad outcome before GPT-4 was released? How likely were we to have a bad outcome after GPT-4 was released? So now, sorry. And how likely are we to have a bad outcome after a particular intervention is applied, like regulation or whatever else they're looking to do? So, one particular snapshot of probability of doom doesn't really tell us if things are getting worse or better because, oh man, hay fever. Um, yeah, so it doesn't. It's all a matter of context, right? Was it even worse before, or was it better, or where are we?
Yeah, you need a generalized theory of relativity for doom, almost, right? Because these scenarios are going to, first of all, multiple scenarios are going to be playing out in parallel, and they're going to impact each other. And we can't afford to have the status quo bias. I mean, taking AI doom off the table, right? There's plenty of other um, front runners for existential risk of the human species without even
Right,
bringing AI into the conversation.
right,
Whether you're worried about climate change, whether you're worried about good old fashioned nuclear war, whether you're worried about a pandemic that actually kills everybody. Um, the the bench is not shallow for things that could take out the broadly interconnected world that we have in the 21st century. Um, and a lot of the sort of collective action problems that are at the core of those doom scenarios have to do with mismatched incentives between different nominally selfish parties, right? So if if you know you rank order your p dooms for all these other things and sum them up, uh, and then compare that against not only your p doom for an artificial superintelligence, but the novel properties of such an artificial superintelligence that might actually be the only thing that can get you out of those other problems.
yep, yep. Yeah. So okay. So in that context, oh sorry, the last point I had is that broad dispersion is checks and balances plus hardening, right? So okay, let's unpack
Mhm.
that. Um, so basically, what we're going to be doing in the channel is advocating for the fact that these tools need to be. It's almost imperative. It's basically an imperative to make these tools available to everybody, not only in the form of an online service, but also in the form of a downloadable tool that everybody can use locally, uh, disconnected from the internet, in all sorts of such ways. Um, And the reason for that is because we think that, first of all, that acts as a check and balance. If the cutting edge is distributed among many people, then you can have distributed AI safety research. You can have a large scale conversation about what is possible with technology, and not only how to use it to perhaps cause harm, but also how to use it to defend yourself against others who might cause
Right.
harm. Right? Because as a general purpose technology, it has both features of helping others perhaps hurt you, but also helping you defend yourself. And again, I think dispersion is a check and balance by itself. But also it's hardening, and by hardening, I don't just mean that we put up our own defenses, but I mean that if you have, the first generation of technology being used to perform even things like, things we don't want, right, like scams or identity fraud or I don't know, cyber attacks or misinformation, disinformation. Take that to mean whatever you want it to mean. Um, Manipulation of the media, all that
Yeah.
kind of things. You want that to
Which
happen
is
early,
already
right? You
beginning.
want that to happen
Right.
before this technology is advanced enough to be undetectable, or whatever else it will be eventually able to do, so that we can actually adjust as it's coming up in capabilities. Because if we are undefended when it goes 4 or 5 generations down the line, then whatever problem we have now, it will be a lot worse later if we haven't been doing the work to harden our civilization in general, right? There
Yeah.
are critical systems that are being run by fax machines right now. That is,
Yeah.
an SMS messages, like insecure SMS messages to be precise, right? This isn't,
Yeah.
we're going to need to fix all of that pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
again, the it's like having a child. The last thing you want is for the child not to fall while its head is close to the ground, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a, if you put your child in a protective bubble while it's a baby, and you just let it out when it's 18, that's not going to be a long life.
Yeah. The concrete example of this, right, is, you know, engagement maximizing social media algorithms, right? Uh, in terms of, the because Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, of course, they're, they've already been using prior generations along this lineage of technology to, you know, analyze sentiment and optimize your algorithms for maximum engagement, right? And we already see the deleterious effect that that has on people's individual psychology. Um, and we've no reason to believe that even in a world where, the doomers get, I shouldn't, I'm going to try and get out of the habit of using the term doomer. I apologize if anyone hears that
Apologies
and
to the
gets their
doomers.
handles up.
Call them doomers.
Um, but the the fact of the matter is that, you know even if we get a pause on the cutting edge of the development of this technology, the preferential access that big companies are going to have to this stuff to even further fine tune their algorithms to maximize their bottom line, is not going to go anywhere, right? And we already can't defend against it. And the having access to something, the power of the adversarial system that's working to extract our psychodrama, um, so far outstrips the natural human brain's ability to engage with it safely already. That the only firewall I could see being functional is one that employs some technology on the same scale of power. And I think that's the gap. If we don't get something and fast that is actually aligned with the individual, as they are interrelated with the social systems that they engage in, um, you know, crank my probability of P doom of us all going crazy, uh, without super intelligence, crank that probability way up.
Yeah, I think the broad framework that we're both operating in is that humanity is a system, right? A complex system. That it's not a mechanism. It's not something where you can press a button and have an action come out the other side. It's more of a um, interacting set of mutually dependent elements that affect each other in multiple ways. And it's let's say an ecosystem, and it can adjust, but its ways of adjusting don't look like a computer where you run a program, or like a mixer where you press a button and it starts or whatever. They look a lot more like a gas. Let's say that you heat it up and the molecules move in different ways, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and
Yeah, there.
we are the molecule, so no molecule has access to a temperature switch or something. Like we that there's only certain kinds of moves that are legal from where we're standing. And again, we're big advocates of doing the thing you can do and not sort of sitting around and dreaming about what you would want to be able to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise being made about the inexplicability of language learning models, and using that as a premise for the danger, right? Is that like, okay, well, there's these hidden optimizers, and there's two layers of hidden optimizers, right? And we don't have a way to formally align these things. We also have to recognize that humans, like, we have no better, and in fact, I would argue probably significantly less understanding and omniscience with regard to human society and the biosphere and the complex system that is humanity and the rest of life on planet Earth, right? So to treat it like, okay, here's the thing we don't understand, but we totally get how international politics works, right?
Well, the
And
thing is
we
that
totally understand all these other things.
yeah, society, the flow of history, the elite over production, will affect the trade war with China, or like you name it, right? The problem is that, of course, nobody will say that like that. They will just say we don't understand large language models and leave it at that, as if
Mm-hmm.
well, let me ask you a different question. Which one do you think we have any chance of understanding?
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
which one
Your
are we
your
making
choice is
progress in understanding?
your choice is to, do you want to pull the strings on the piece of software that you don't understand, or do you want to pull the strings on the Earth that you don't understand?
Yeah. Anyway, so shall we kind of talk through some ideas of what we think we talked about a number of things that we don't think are possible, or either we shouldn't do or we can't do. Shall we talk
Mhm.
about a few things that we maybe can do? So we
Yeah.
haven't talked about this before. You might disagree with some of these, or you might have others that come to mind as you
Okay.
as we talk through it. That's totally fine by me. I'm just gonna read what I basically have already put out in a tweet, and we can sort of expand on it, right? And by the way, these ideas are neither the best ideas we can come up with, or the best set, or even a complete set, or whatever. They are literally, I just put out some ideas out there just so that everybody knows that there exist ideas that do not entail a lot of, do not break the rules that we have described. In fact, actually, let's um, one more thing before we get into the list itself that we didn't cover. The general principle that this list is formulated upon is the idea of not introducing new single points of control and single points of failure. Right.
Mhm.
So I guess this is the last what you can't do, or you shouldn't do anyway. So the idea is any existential risk that applies to humanity is built upon the some single point of control or single point of failure. For instance, the planet is a single point of failure, right? The planet fails, we're gone. If our water supply fails, we're gone. If our air supply fails, we're gone. There's a number of things that
Mhm.
if they fail, if our crops, all of our crops worldwide fail because of some sort of biological agent, we're gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Potato
the
famine.
oh, sorry,
Potato famine, right? Is the
right?
famous
Right.
crop example.
So but global, then for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
um, the basically any existential risk can go back to a single point of failure. So if we want to seriously take the idea of existential risk seriously, what we should be doing is, to borrow a term, deconstructing these single points of failure, right, and single points of
Mhm.
control, dismantling them, to be precise, right. We want to remove them from the picture, and for God's sake, not add new ones at the very least. It's a bare
Yeah,
minimum. So and this sort of serves as a general answer to people who make suggestions that can broadly be translated to the creation of some sort of an agency that oversees artificial intelligence or whatever else. um, not only practically, that agency will be a single point of failure, which means that either will be captured by humans, or the first hostile AI that emerges with enough capability is going to try to capture that agency.
yeah,
Because
because it's a bullseye.
why make a novel virus when you can do the thing that everybody's done forever, right? It's
Yeah.
just so much worse when your captor is an artificial intelligence and not a puny human. Um,
Mhm.
anyway, if we don't want to do that, right? What can we do? So this is where
Mhm.
that list comes in. So the first idea I had was fund red teaming. A lot of red teaming.
Mhm.
Do you want to give an example? Do you want to describe what red teaming is, Ryan? Like for any
Yeah,
viewers?
yeah. Yeah, for the non-tech heads, the general idea, and this is actually it's used in technology for security analysis, also in journalism. If there's a big story that is about to break in a newsroom, essentially, you get someone who's on your side or part of your organization, right? Whether you're working on a product, or you're working on a story, um, and you insulate them from the development process, right? You keep them having fresh eyes so that they
Right.
don't sort of take on the groupthink of those that are constructing the thing. And you effectively have them role play as an adversary, and do their best to try and attack, undermine, manipulate whatever system, or in the case of a news story, get them to try and question the sources, undermine the narrative, debunk any factual claims, and you compartmentalize that. So that's their entire job, right? It's not just, oh, I built this thing and I should care about it, the security, so I'm going to spend an afternoon thinking about security, right? You give someone and you say, your job is to be evil for good, right? And bounded, like, demonstrate the attack, but don't actually steal the credit card information, right? Don't
Right.
actually do the thing. Um, and
Right.
by doing that, it's effectively it's a simulation of the real world adversary. So the idea is to harden the thing preemptively.
Right, and by the way, when it comes to AI, they can play that adversary both against the AI and against our civilization, right? So they can use it to simulate attacks on infrastructure or critical systems, and then say, "Hey, you've got these problems. You know, here's how we got in. Uh, Probably a good idea for you to fix that."
Yeah, there
So
is that second part does raise the that sounds very analogous to gain of function research, right? Um, or in a similar vein, right? If you want to, I suffice to say,
the
I would
idea
I
here is
would plant
that
a, I would want to plant a flag there, to think through the ramifications of that subset of the strategy.
the question here, the thing with gain of function research is that you're trying to get ahead of somebody, right? So that's why you go and do
Hmm.
it yourself, arguably.
Yeah,
But the somebody in gain of function research is nature, right? And nature is not actively trying to kill you. It
right.
might kill you,
It's just
but it's
indifferent to you.
it's indifferent. right? The problem, the reason why this is more compelling here is that there are adversaries out there who do want to get your credit card, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there is intelligence, intelligent agents. I don't mean necessarily intelligence agencies, though they're definitely part of the mix here.
Sure.
But I also mean just like people who, are up to no good. So that's not a question, right? That is a
Yeah.
fact. So that changes the calculus. But I see where you're coming from. But basically, again, whatever the boundaries are within which they should play, I think I don't know that we have a well-funded red team right now for humanity to be constantly trying to flaws, elevate flaws, highlight attack methods, and in general, trying to help us harden our systems.
Yeah. I mean, everything I see is basically, it's testing in production, right? You just sort of, they're treating the market as the red
Which
team,
is better than nothing, but definitely can do
right?
better than that.
But yeah, you definitely
Secondly,
want to. Oh yeah, go ahead.
um, I would say wide funding of alignment initiatives, and I mean that in the old school DARPA kind of way, not the current. Like basically wide funding of ideas with a low barrier for entry, and an understanding that 999 of 1,000 will fail, but that one that will come up with this counterintuitive insight that will push the alignment field forward is worth it, right?
Yeah.
And the emphasis should be on funding as many sort of out there ideas as possible, and not sort of subjecting them to a standard that most ideas will not be able to pass, because again, the whole point is to get one successful insight out of 1,000
Mhm.
uh, grants, right? So if even if you gave $3 million per grant, that is $3 billion. And if you get one insight that helps humanity align AI, and I bet you're going to get a lot more than that. That's
Yeah.
so worth it. It's not even, it's not even funny.
Um,
Um,
Before
yeah.
you move on to the next, do you have any more that are the central theme is sort of funding allocation for projects?
Um,
Um,
Let me see.
I have sort of a meta commentary on that category.
Yep. Let me see. Um, Yeah, I have a couple towards the end. So one is develop more effective debate systems so that complex disagreements can be resolved. Right. And I think you probably know a lot more of my thinking on this than most people will take away. But the point is, have we tried to make debate more effective, efficient? I know a lot of people have tried in the pre-LLM era and sort of had systems that fell flat, but have we tried in the post-LLM era?
Right.
And the other one in that broad category is to have a very broad public awareness campaign, and training, really. People need to know what's coming. People need to be empowered to use technology, ideally to find also new areas to use their capabilities, especially if their worker is going to be disrupted by the coming of
Yeah.
artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. Okay. So with those in mind, I guess. Sorry, what was the first of the two that you just said?
Develop more
Uh,
effective debate systems.
yes. Just as a quick comment on that, I did see somebody uh, doing this. So a month and a half ago, so it may as well have been a decade ago, and I couldn't provide a link to save my life. But the what I am remembering is that it effectively it was basically just a not so much a moderator as a mediator, right? And AI that was sort of listening into a conversation and sort of trying to play this role of just in time English to English translation, and saying, "Hey, are you sure you want to use this inflammatory language to maybe chill out?" And that's I don't know if that might be that might rhyme with what you're after more than it is what you're after, because I get the sense that you're more thinking about sort of formal debate, truth synthesis, versus sort of kumbaya getting along discourse. But I think, I tend to have
There are
the
a
more
lot of
hippie
things
position
that
on
fall in that
those
bucket.
things. That yeah,
Yeah, there are a lot of things
um,
that fall in that bucket, right? It could be anything from grounding every fact into ultimate, the objective
yeah.
truth,
Well,
whatever that means, to
yeah, I
making sure people don't get needlessly inflamed.
right, yeah, and I am of the opinion that uh, etiquette is an epistemic virtue. I do think that there's a domain in which good etiquette actually does reliably help you converge on the truth. But let's not go off on that tangent right now. The thing that I wanted to say about things that broadly need to be funded, because always the objection to that or the concern is, okay, where does the money come from? But Sam Altman wants to next year start talking about UBI initiatives, right? And I think on everyone's list of concerns is like, okay, what do you do when Microsoft is owns the basically runs the economy because there's no reason to do anything outside of an LLM environment, right? Humans are just less efficient. So what do we do with job displacement? Um, and the the first blush answer is like, okay, well let's tax the shit out of it and give the money away, and fair enough. But hearing you talk about these alignment things, that even seems like a step better, right? Like tax the shit out of it and use the proceeds to fund the ongoing safety research that keeps apprised of the state of the art. I
Yeah,
could
the
see
thing
a
is, like,
cycle going there.
I don't even want to advocate for that kind of like regulation. What I want to say is, if money is going to be put to this, right? Assuming there is a budget, right, and people are thinking of
Mm-hmm.
getting that budget from somewhere. If people are thinking about slowing down development, which is a cost, if people are thinking about all sorts of inflicting all sorts of costs on to entrepreneurs, society, governments, whatever, here are some things that are extremely high value and should be first before we talk about worldwide agencies and capping compute and stopping the production of GPUs or whatever.
Right.
Um, so okay, so
In
what
that
should
case, I would put one more thing in the bucket of things to spend money on, which is the uh, a sort of incubator like environment for approaches to the economic problem itself, as well as to the like a green team, if you will, for figuring out how to um, navigate a new type of economy that we're going to be getting into.
developing novel coordination systems probably covers that and more,
Yeah.
right? Um, find ways in which multiple people can each get most of what they want by working together rather than having one tell everybody what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the next one I've got is somewhat contentious, and people definitely tend to react to that one. But it is to move towards the integration of human and AI cognition, or
Mm-hmm.
extending human cognition with AI. Right. So this is not about humans merging into the machine or humans merging with the machine. It is the machine merging into the human. Though at that level, all sorts of modalities open up, and I couldn't tell you exactly how it's going to work, but the broad strokes of it is we want humanity to be the first mover when it comes to the super intelligent agent space. Uh, we are lucky enough to be in a position that this technology is not agentic by default, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just sitting there answering questions at first approximation. Um, and that means that the game's not yet over. And the game might be over when we have the first self-improving agent, properly self-improving agent with, indefinite kind of line of sight to improvements. So what we might want to do is to get there first, right? Get to the place where, some of us, and that doesn't mean that everybody should be forced to do that or whatever. I'm just saying some of us are these agents with more capacity than the machines alone, so that those people can steer the next steps. And again, I'm not, on the one hand, I understand how that sounds. I think it should be voluntary for people to join that effort, but also that nobody should be forced to join that effort. And I think that's the most voluntariest frame I can use. I don't think it should be a closed group that does that, and I don't think it should be everybody should be obliged to make that leap. I think it should be an open group.
Yeah. And I think if anyone listens to this or watches this and, gets scary Matrixy vibes, maybe a way to frame this with, precedent in the real world of today is, to an extent, this is an extension of, having a cell phone in your pocket all the time, right? Or having a smart home that detects when you're it connects to your GPS and you come home and it turns the AC on or off, depending on where you are, what time of year it is. We've been on this course as a species for a long time with technology, and the salient difference is that this feels different because you start talking about Neuralink stuff, and that gets really sci-fi for people. But really, it's a as high bandwidth an interface as you can get between your brain and technological sense apparatus, whether that's the Hubble telescope, so that you can research, deep space, whether it's the internet and Wikipedia, or your favorite note-taking app so that you can offload some of the storage of your brain, whether it's the contact list in your phone, whether it's your Apple Watch monitoring your heartbeat so that you have another feedback loop on your overall health. There's all sorts of, the framing of technology as, the 6th through millionth sense that humanity can avail themselves of. And I would say that this sort of thing is novel in its own right, but it's also of a piece. So to me, that doesn't seem all that scary as an individual.
Yeah, the way I think about it is an amplifier, right? And that amplification is of of intelligence or of, but also of perception, and potentially of our entanglement with reality. Like it could be, I think the fear is that this will trap us in a virtual world. But again, like with other arguments we've made before, I think we're already in a virtual world. Like everything you are experiencing about the real world is mediated by your senses, right? And you're limited by the degree to which you have senses. And some senses are direct senses, like your smell or your eyesight or your hearing. Some of them are indirect, which is like, I don't know, your Twitter inbox or your browser. But there are, receptacles, nonetheless, of information, right? And whether you have tighter integration to some of those, again, you can use them however you want, but some of the ways you can use them can actually bring you closer to reality, not farther. But anyway, that's a long conversation. The long story short is that I think if we play the story forward, and if we accept that agent AI is going to be a thing that happens, then long story short is that either it is a hybrid between human and machine that dominates, or a machine only entity that dominates. And I know which one I'd prefer to have the capture that flag, so to speak. So what else? Encourage open source and distributed development so as to minimize discontinuity and centralization. So we've talked a little bit about checks and balances, but let's talk about it a little bit more. So the idea of discontinuity is that let's say we pause the development of the next version of GPT, for example, right? Um, what happens then? Well, what happens then is that we're improving our prompting strategies, we're improving our hardware, we're improving, the competition is improving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that when the next level of GPT drops, say GPT-5, it will be a lot more powerful than we understand because it will suddenly meet the latest hardware and the latest prompting strategies and the latest data and whatever else, rather than having GPT-4 just get better
Co-evolved.
and better slowly.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Rather than having co-evolved.
Exactly, exactly. So I think these continuities are a great existential risk, and we should avoid them. And a way to avoid that is to promote open source and having the cutting edge be developed in the real world rather than in the corporate lab in secret somewhere. And while that sounds crazy, the most popular operating system for mobile phones and for servers, weirdly enough, and for IoT devices is Linux, which is developed that way. So there are game theoretic patterns that do, in fact, favor that path rather than the commercial and closed path. We'll see what happens, but the fact of the matter is that every technologist I know that's worth their salt is putting all of their time into this, which will create the opportunity for positive some, I think, collaborations beyond anything we've ever seen. So I wouldn't rule it out at the very least, but I think we should actively encourage it. Personal AIs, which fits both with the human AI element and the open source, which is that we need to start encouraging the development and the adoption of technology that gets individuals their own AIs to that they can fully control, right? Not just like some server product from OpenAI, but something that lives in your home and you can tune to your desires, what you want to be seeing, what you don't want to be seeing, what you want it to be doing on your behalf, rather
Yeah.
than what somebody else chooses to do.
Yeah. The same way you do not outsource your firewall um, to a software as a service, right? There's a
Yeah,
firewall running on your network.
yeah.
Um,
Another element I would say, I mean, I've written it slightly differently here, but the way I would say it now is probably some sort of digital bill of rights, right? So we want to restate the bill of rights in a way that will translate to this new world, right? So, for instance, the freedom of speech is powerful, but I think now we sadly need to articulate that that means the freedom to actually be heard by people without being censored, without being filtered, without being if the other person doesn't want to hear you, that's one thing, but at least they should have the opportunity to hear you if they want to, right? They should not,
right.
all of this sort of algorithmic, skullduggery um, is a violation of some form of speech. And if we are going to be doing anything at all, we can't force every country in the world to adopt these regulations. So this is something that one country can do, or as many as possible. But it is to actually guarantee that the data ownership, the ability, the freedom of speech, the right to arm yourself with AI technology, if we're going to call it a weapon,
Right.
fine. The right to privacy should expand to your home and your digital sort of
Yeah.
identity. Nothing new in a way, but something very new in another. Basically, re-articulating the basic rights that
Yeah,
have
and
worked
this
so
has
well.
been long overdue, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it was overdue
the fact of
before.
the
It is
matter is,
just like red alert now, basically.
yeah, yeah, precisely. Like the freedom of speech and assembly. Well, we do most of our speech and assembly in ones and zeros over a network these days.
Yeah,
Um,
the next one is actually something that we might end up doing ourselves. But I think as information starts to come in from all sorts of sources and a lot of sources that we don't even have any provenance for, right? So we just don't know where it came from. It's going to become essential to build what I call a web of trust, though it's probably going to be something even more decentralized than that. Basically, we need a way to have known sources that we trust and sources that they trust, so that whenever we get a piece of information in front of us, it's not just the information, but it's also the path that
Yeah.
information came through,
Yeah.
that we can audit and trust. And if we see something come in that doesn't end up to be being trustworthy, we can downgrade it and have that, the source that gave you that thing gets downgraded, and the source that gave them that thing gets downgraded, and the source that gave them that thing gets downgraded, so that over time you converge towards having highly trusted sources that are deserve being highly trusted. We're going to get into a lot more detail. I'm kind of working a little bit of a prototype on this. I don't know if it's going to get anywhere, but if it is, we'll be talking about it in this channel. And I think the last one, and it covers a couple more, is focus on developing on sort of again not deconstructing, but dismantling single points of control, single points of failure of our civilization, so that when an AI eventually appears, it doesn't have easy paths to dominate everybody else. Like, we want sort of a balanced state among AIs and humans. We don't want one AI to be head over, to be substantially stronger than the others. And one way to become substantially stronger is to have Chekhov's gun waiting right there, called, the World Health Organization or the United Nations, waiting to be captured. That is the worst possible idea.
This is the this is us. I think this point actually takes the the P-doom of superintelligence the most seriously, if this makes sense, right? Because it's sort of this position, I think, from me at least, if not from you, is kind of downstream of the recognition that, like, yes, we will get a super intelligent system that will be misaligned. Like, the probability of that is large enough to be very concerned about. So what do you do before that emerges? Well, you make damn sure that, given that it's going to be capable of, taking over something before you get wise, the first thing you should do is make sure that there is no single thing that it can take over and win the game. Right? You do not want a first round checkmate to be possible.
Yeah.
You cannot configure the board such that you're only one move away from checkmate.
Yeah, in a way, it's the inverse of engineer for serendipity, right? It's like an engineer away from an accident. Make the situation, take all the volatile compounds out of the space. Make it so that, like, bake in the probability of an accident happening. Maybe, be sure that an accident will happen. However, make it such that accident is as reversible as possible. Right. So first of all, have a lot of other AIs that might be not as powerful, but are more aligned with you, and therefore they can perhaps all gang up and put away the attacker. But also, don't give easy paths to elimination. And while we also should recognize that that's not easy, so to speak, right? That we don't know all the paths, but that doesn't mean that we should allow the ones that we do know to just be there, right? So, I mean, this is standard voluntarist, libertarian, anarchist, whatever you want to call it, discourse. However, it has become a lot more, intense by a couple of facts. First of all, that we now have ways to potentially develop far more capable coordination mechanisms, and secondly, that the danger that these sort of centralized organizations offer is not merely corporate capture; it is capture by something that is a lot more malevolent than that potentially. So it's both more urgent and more realistic to start talking about what that might look like. So again, while we don't necessarily have too much time to put a lot of detail into this, I think that should be on the table as a concept and as a sort of aspirational objective.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to You need to dethrone the Leviathan before it's held hostage. Right.
Right. So I think we have a unique opportunity here to have a first video that is, roughly around the hour mark. We've gotten through a remarkable amount of material for 1 hour, I think. So definitely, +1 for preparing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We should do that more often.
Yeah. Until then, we're going to be doing more of these. Hopefully, over time, we're going to sort of find a standard time that we do these. We're going to try to be a little bit more organized on prior efforts. I think if you want to be getting your notifications on this, you can press all the buttons, and you will be getting your updates. Yeah, I think we're gonna just leave it at that. And I think the next session we do is gonna be a little bit more laid back and a little bit more practical.
Yeah,
Is that fair?
yeah. I'd say so.
All right. And on that note, thank you for watching, and we'll be back soon.